Masters Radio presents Music History, Episode 8, The Grunge Era. Grunge, grime, dirt. Also, the style of rock music characterized by a ruckus guitar sound and lazy vocal delivery. Grunge, sometimes known as a Seattle sound, is an alternative rock genre and subculture which emerged during the mid-1980s in the U.S. state of Washington, particularly in Seattle and nearby towns. Grunge uses elements of punk rock and heavy metal. The genre featured the distorted electric guitar sound used in both genres, although some bands go with more emphasis on one or the other. Like these genres, grunge typically uses electric guitar, bass guitar, drums, and vocal. Grunge also incorporates influences from indie rock bands such as Sonic Youth. Lyrics are typically angst-filled and introspective, often addressing themes such as social alienation, self-doubt, abuse, neglect, betrayal, social and emotional isolation, addiction, psychological trauma, and a desire for freedom. Although the word grunge had been used to describe bands since the 1960s, this was the first association of grunge with the grinding, sludgy sound of Seattle. What you have to know is it's expensive and time-consuming to get a recording to sound clean. So for those bands just starting out, it was cheaper for them to leave the sound dirty and just turn up the volume. The band Green River released their EP, Come On Down, in 1985. Which is cited by many as being the first grunge record. Another seminal release in the development of grunge was a deep compilation release by CZ Records in 1986. The record featured multiple tracks by 6 bands: Green River, Soundgarden, Melvins, Malfunction, Skinyard, and the U-Men. For many of them, it was their first appearance on record. The artists had a mostly heavy, aggressive sound that melted the slower tempos of heavy metal with the intensity of hardcore. The recording process was so low budget that each band was given 4 hours of studio time. Later that year, Bruce Pavitt released the Sub Pop 100 compilation and Green River's Dry as a Bone EP as part of his new label Sub Pop. An early Sub Pop catalog described the Green River EP as ultra-loose grunge that destroyed the morals of a generation. Sub Pop's Bruce Pavitt and Jonathan Poneman started working to ensure that their live project had that Seattle sound, while also paying homage of his inspiration to other regional music scenes in the grunge music history. In the beginning, grunge concerts were sparsely attended, many by fewer than a dozen people. But Sub Pop photographer Charles Peterson's pictures helped create the impression that such concerts were major events. Mudhoney, which was formed by former members of Green River, served as a flagship band of pop during their entire time with the label and spearheaded the Seattle grunge movement. In September of 1991, Nirvana released its major label debut, Nevermind. It was the release of the first single, Smells Like Teen Spirit, that marked the instigation of the grunge music phenomenon. Nevermind was selling 400,000 copies a week by Christmas 1991. The success of Nevermind surprised the music industry. It not only popularized grunge, but also established the commercial viability of alternative rock in general. Other bands even started to replicate Nirvana's success, such as Pearl Jam, whose album 10 became a breakthrough success a year later, being certified gold and reaching number 2 on the Billboard charts. It was also certified 13 times platinum by the RIAA. The popular breakthrough of these grunge bands prompted Rolling Stones to nickname Seattle the New Liverpool. Major record labels signed most of the prominent grunge bands in Seattle, while a second influx of bands moved to the city in hopes of success. The popularity of grunge resulted in a large interest in Seattle, and with that, every industry over-marketed grunge, basically turning it into a fad. Marketers even went as far as selling grunge concepts for air fresheners, hair gel, and even something called grunge light or easy listening music. And with all that success and attention, backlash starting against grunge, which began to develop more in late 1992, not only from certain Seattle residents, but by other bands and musicians as well, which ironically many grunge artists were uncomfortable with their success and fame. Nirvana's Kurt Cobain told Michael Azerrad, "Famous is the last thing I wanted to be." Pearl Jam also felt the burden of success, with much of the attention falling on frontman Eddie Vedder. But even so, grunge band success continued to skyrocket, with bands such as Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Utero, Alice in Chains, and many more performing well commercially. A number of factors contributed to grunge's decline. Prominent critics and historians do not agree on the exact point. Catherine Strong wrote, "At the end of 1993, grunge had become unstable. It was entering the first stages of being killed off." She pointed out that the scene had become so successful and widely known that imitators had begun to enter the field. Another reporter stated that the downward spiral began in 1994, as the influx of major label money into the scene changed the culture, and it had nowhere to go but down. During the mid-90s, many grunge bands broke up or became less visible. There were also many artists battling horrid drug addictions and struggling for survival. Then sadly, on April 8, 1994, Kurt Cobain was found deceased in a Seattle home after a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Nirvana, of course, disbanded. Pearl Jam canceled its summer tour in protest of ticket vendor Ticketmaster's unfair business practices in the summer of '94, which significantly changed the way they did concerts and venues that at one point didn't do shows in the US because of their Ticketmaster boycott. In 1996, Alice in Chains gave their final performances with their lead singer, Lane Staley. Soundgarden and Screaming Trees also released their final studio albums of the 1990s, Down on the Upside and Dust. Just know, grunge will forever be known as one of those game-changing genres that forever changed the trajectory of where rock was headed. But also remember that just because a specific genre has gone underground doesn't mean that something else wasn't born from said commercial death of grunge.
Thanks for coming. Good night. God bless.
Thank you for watching episode 8 of Masters Radio Music History, The Grunge Era.